Meeting equity, at least the way that I define it, is that everyone in a meeting has equal access to everyone else on a direct basis.
Equity to me is making sure that everyone in that meeting is seen, heard, and can contribute, but also can get out of the meeting what it is that they need to.
How can the employees be equipped with the right skills, both social as well as technology skills that will help them thrive in hybrid work?
I think meeting equity to me is making sure everyone has a voice, no matter where you are in the space. So this is really what the buzzword's about today.
Greetings and welcome to this last in a series of 5 IMCCA podcasts to wrap up the year 2023. I'm once again David Danto representing the IMCCA today, and I'm with my fellow IMCCA board member, Rich Sasson.
This week's subject is the importance of meeting equity. What does meeting equity mean? Have we achieved it or part of it? Can we truly work from anywhere? Let's hear what IMCCA member firms and industry analysts have to say about it.
Meeting equity is an environment where people, regardless of where they're located, are equal participants in a meeting. Go back to the old days, the people who were dialed in really didn't know what was going on in the meeting. Now we've got scenarios where there's a mix of people at home, mixed people in the office. People who are at home may not be able to see the people that are in the office very effectively, might not be able to collaborate with them if they're still using shared whiteboards. We see in our research about 30% of companies are actively investing in tools to improve meeting equity. Those include adding touchscreens into meeting rooms for people to be able to co-work together on content, multi-room camera systems, center cam systems, intelligent capabilities that grab people in the room and frame them into their own window. I think it's going to be a huge area going forward because I think people realize that you can't go back to the way things were, where you have meetings where there may be an advantage for people who are in the office or even an advantage for people who are at home who can collaborate in chat and whiteboards and so on.
And it typically refers to an equal experience for in-office and remote user. And they're really speaking about video and audio. So as I look in this space, we all have pretty well lit rooms. I hear everybody clearly. And as Stephanie was discussing earlier about inclusivity of the meeting, it means that if somebody wants to be heard, they can be heard.
It used to be that if you weren't in the meeting room, you felt a little out of it. But since COVID, it's actually been the opposite, in that sometimes we have better tools on our screens that show all the meeting participants. It shows their names. There are ways to chat. And there are a lot of tools that we actually have in the meeting experience from working remotely than when we're actually in the in-person meeting.
And I am of the opinion that audio is way more important than video. I am terribly sorry to all of our video creation friends, but if you don't have audio, you don't have much of a meeting.
In terms of meeting equity, the two things for me are, like you saw, that you've got consistent, good quality technology, you've got great non-reverberant spaces, you've got good bandwidth, so you've got an equal playing field in terms of the technology, whether you're remote or otherwise. And that then it's up to the facilitator to make sure the people with the smallest voice in the room get a say.
So today we have to look around the room and say, what does this person need to be included? What does this person need to be successful? And it might not be the same thing that the person needs next to them. So maybe in a meeting, this person does better when they're on the other side of the glass because maybe they're a little introverted, but they're adding value through chat. Because they add value to chat better than they do verbally. We're
technically a better state than we've ever been in terms of technology being good, to have a good experience at home and a good experience at the office. But I think there's still friction there. There's still work to do. You can see it in meetings today when somebody goes to share, like it's still a little bit fumbly, it's still a little bit imperfect, or the person on remote can see the whiteboard, but they can't really engage in the whiteboard in the same way the people in the room have. So I think we've come a long way, but I think there's still opportunities to improve that experience.
Do you ever have true meeting equity? I think the answer is no on there. Right. But from an equity perspective, I call it democratization, right? You have to have the same abilities regardless of where you are. I do think it's easier to have a collaborative conversation in person than it is on on video because it's more difficult to interrupt some of those things when you're on video and overlooking. You don't get as much of the room, the feel of the room, and the eyeball look and the body gestures that you necessarily would pick up on. And you're not multitasking as much, quite honestly, in these meetings when you're in person.
Okay, so meeting equity is pretty simple to understand. It's just everyone. It's fairness in a meeting. Everyone being just as visible, just as audible, having just as much of an impact when they speak. And the problem is that everyone from home looks basically the way I do now. We've learned how to frame ourselves over the course of the pandemic. Everyone figured this out for themselves. Everyone's y'all looking pretty good out there on camera at home, and in a meeting room, I might look like this. So am I going to be as effective when I'm trying to talk to you? Are you gonna hear what I'm saying? Are you going to get my message? Not as much.
COVID made us get better with meeting equity because people who didn't feel they were part of the meeting or able to share their information got frustrated enough to say something about it. So I think we've gotten much better as a result of being forced to get better. I think there's still meeting equity needed in any meeting, i.e. things like what's the agenda, who's presenting, what material is going to be shared and how. That's almost meeting equity for a face-to-face meeting, let alone a meeting at a distance.
So we've come an awful long way, I think, in enabling that kind of thing. And I think enabling people to really be part of content collaboration activities in real time, for example, is now starting to be a reality. Seeing everybody that's in the meeting is now starting to be a reality. Recognizing the faces and the expressions on those faces in the meeting to know whether they're getting irritated with you or not is now starting to be a reality. This is really, it's starting to get there. Now, there's always going to be challenging use cases. And I think those are the things, right? We're now starting to deal not just with the small meeting rooms connecting with home office workers and so on and so forth, but we're now starting to think about those bigger meeting rooms, right? And the boardrooms and the auditoriums and the large classrooms and these kind of spaces as well.
In the context of audio, because we're, first and foremost an audio company, the notion that in a bowling alley style room, the person in the back of the room cannot hear with the same effectiveness as the person in the front of the room, or the person in the front of the room is being drowned out by a volume which has been raised to the point to allow the person in the back to hear. It is unequal in that context.
The way that I define it would be making sure that everybody who is in a meeting has the best possible experience for how they're showing up in the meeting. So that means people who might be in person should be able to collaborate and communicate with people who are remote as simply as the people who are remote should be able to see who's speaking in a meeting, see them, enough up close enough to be able to discern facial expressions and even micro body language and things like that get missed when someone's further down in the room.
Some of it's technical and some of it's, more training around how to facilitate an effective meeting. I think still there's extroverts that regardless of whatever technology, they're going to say more and say it loudly and talk over people. And then there's introverts who have a lot to share and oftentimes, sit back and think deeper. And we need tools or policies to be able to allow people at the end of a meeting. I'd love to see where a meeting, especially a larger meeting, concludes, and as opposed to teams will pop up and say, hey, well, how is the meeting quality? I would like for it to be able to somehow say, hey, were you able to get your points across? Do you feel that this meeting was effective? Was it too long, too short? Did we have too many people, not enough people? That would be effective meetings. And I think that meeting equity, when you drill down and say, well, why do we want meeting equity? It's because we want effective meetings.
Number one, we have to start from the fact that the equitable experience is nirvana. That is the goal. But even pre-pandemic, we would have never had equity, right? I get the wrong seat in the room. I'm by the window. And then the other part too, let's take the demographics. Let's take the social component in mind. bunch of different people with different ranks and different teams and different levels in a meeting, and maybe someone didn't speak. So we have to start with the idea that we are looking to try to get as close as possible. I don't think we're at a point where I don't think anybody can achieve pure equity. It's impossible.
Asked, have we achieved meeting equity? Absolutely not. I think to your exact point, right? So what is meeting equity? Meeting equity is this idea that everybody has equal contribution and influence over the outcome of a meeting. On the technology side, we talk about meeting equity from a very simplistic view of that is, can I create a meeting where virtual participants have the exact same ability to affect the outcome of a meeting as in-person participants, right? That's our luxury on the vendor side to say, to me, that's meeting equity, but that's not truly meeting equity. And I'm totally with you. We've never had it. And I would argue we never will. To me, it's an aspirational goal, not an end goal.
It has changed the way that we work. And I mean that in the best of senses, and it's continuing to evolve. I hate to always just put on the old man hat, but I look at the younger generation, my kids, your kids, the next generation that's just graduated college. They communicate in very, very different ways. Their expectations of communication, both personal and in the workplace, are very different from what we might have come up with. And so this idea of always on, always available, anything with a screen can be my communication device. That has absolutely revolutionized the way that we all work.
One of the effects of the pandemic is we sort of have all evolved into the least common denominator type meetings. Whereas before, when we were all in the same rooms, we used physical objects. We knew we could see each other's gestures. We could use the whiteboard. We could stand up and write things. And during the pandemic, we got used to having meetings, not accessing any of that. And even now that we started to come back, we've been hesitant about bringing those back into our meeting spaces and really leveraging the virtually or physically being in one space. And we haven't gotten there yet. And maybe part of it's technology, part of it's socially. You're back in, you're in an office, but you're still doing basically Teams meetings in your own offices, because you have yet to go back to being in that physical space. Like I said, even physically or virtually. We haven't gotten there yet.
That's it for this week's 2023 Wrap Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this series of IMCCA podcasts and look forward to many more in 2024.
For all of us at the IMCCA and from the respective member companies, we wish you and yours a happy, healthy holiday season and a safe and prosperous new year.